Welcome to ISDC, everyone, and welcome to Dallas. My name is George Whitesides, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Space Society, and I can't tell you how happy I am to see you all here today. We've got a fabulous program, and it's a great privilege for me to introduce our first speaker, particularly because he had a direct connection to what you just saw there in the final scene. He was the pilot of the inaugural flight of the Space Shuttle Discovery, I believe, and also commanded the ship, in addition to that, 2 more times. I'd like to introduce Mike Coates, who is the current and 10th director of the Johnson Space Center of NASA. Coates graduated from Ramona High School, Riverside, California, in 1964. He received a Bachelor of Science degree from the United States Naval Academy in 1968, a Master of Science in Administration of Science in Technology from George Washington University in 1977, and Master of Science in Aeronautical Engineering from the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School in 1979. Coates, a Navy pilot and flight instructor, has logged more than 5,000 flying hours in 28 different types of aircraft and more than 400 carrier landings. He was selected as an astronaut candidate in January 1978 and became a NASA astronaut in August 1979. He was a member of the STS-4 astronaut support crew and was a capsule communicator for STS-4 and STS-5. From May 1989 to March 1990, he served as acting chief of the astronaut office. And as I mentioned, he was the pilot on STS-41D, which was the maiden voyage of the Space Shuttle Discovery. He was also spacecraft commander on STS-29 and STS-39, and is thus a veteran of 3 space flights, all on the Space Shuttle Discovery. He's logged more than 463 hours in space and retired from the U.S. Navy and the astronaut office in August 1991. He then started a fairly illustrious career in the corporate world. From 1991 to 1996, he was Vice President of Avionics and Communications Operations for Loral. From 1996 to 1998, he was Vice President of Civil Space Programs for Lockheed Martin. And from 1998 to 2005, he was Vice President of Advanced Space Transportation for Lockheed Martin Space Systems Company in Colorado. In November 2005, he returned to NASA as the 10th director of the Johnson Space Center. I hope you'll all join me in giving a great round of applause and warm welcome to Mike Coates. Thank you.
Thank you, George. I spent the last 2 days back on Capitol Hill in Washington, along with all the other NASA center directors. We've been going around to meet, especially our local delegations. Of course, for me, it was the Texas delegation, as many as we could get in to see, to emphasize a couple things. One is the budget. The President's fiscal year 08 budget request is absolutely vital to NASA after the cut we took with the continuing resolution this year. The other item that we've been stressing a lot is the need for math, science, and engineering education. We are not graduating the number of engineers that we need in this country. There was an article in Smart Money magazine in January, just a short little column. I don't know if the statistics are accurate or not, but it certainly got my attention when it said in the year 2010, 90% of the physical scientists and engineers in the world will be in Asia, and half of our physical scientists and engineers will be eligible to retire. So we are producing far fewer engineers and scientists in this country than we used to produce. And of course, in the space program, that's important to us. Fortunately, the Texas delegation, historically and today, is a very strong supporter of the space program, and it is bipartisan, both Republicans and Democrats. So I was basically preaching to the choir but I think it's important to preach to the choir occasionally. I did spend a lot of time with Congressman Nick Lamson last couple days. And of course, he was supposed to be here this morning. We were supposed to be on the same plane last night, flying here to Dallas. When we showed up at the airport, they indicated the plane was 5 hours late, and eventually I think the flight got canceled. So we talked about it, and he said, you know, if I don't show up, you're free to speak for me. I said, great, we'll do some fundraising here. The lawyers told me I can't do that, so I missed an opportunity here. Now, he ended up in Newark, and I flew to Houston, and then flew up here this morning, so I'm going to give him a very bad time about legislators not being able to achieve their objectives here. And if you would help me, I'd appreciate it. I'd like to say a few words and then answer questions if I've got some time here this morning. You know, this weekend we pause to remember and honor those who have given their lives to protect the freedoms that we Americans share. This Tuesday, May 29th, will mark another important anniversary in American history, the 90th anniversary of John F. Kennedy's birth. Of course, the 35th President of the United States, and he was born in Brookline, Massachusetts on May 29th, 1917. For those of us my age, it seems like he will always be about 45 years old, but he'd be 90 if he were still with us today. 46 years ago today, on May 25th, 1961, in a special message to the Congress on urgent national needs, delivered in person before a joint session of Congress, President Kennedy set this nation on an unprecedented course to expand the frontier of space. He set the nation on this course not to compete in a race with the Russians, but because, as he said, we go into space because whatever mankind must undertake, free men must fully share. Now, you saw some of the quotes from President Kennedy on the video, and I've got several more because I think they really pertain to what we're trying to do today. President Kennedy followed this up by saying, I believe this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal before this decade is out of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or so expensive to accomplish. We propose to accelerate the development of the appropriate lunar spacecraft. We propose to develop alternate liquid and solid fuel boosters, much larger than any now being developed, until certain which is superior. We propose additional funds for other engine development and for unmanned explorations. Explorations which are particularly important for one purpose, which this nation will never overlook: the survival of the man who first makes this daring flight. But in a very real sense, it will not be one man going to the moon. If we make this judgment affirmatively, it will be an entire nation, for all of us must work to put him there. So President Kennedy was the first of our nation's leaders to recognize the importance of U.S. preeminence in space. He understood the strategic value of space power when he campaigned on the theme of the missile gap between the United States and the Soviet Union. While we now know that the actual gap was in favor of the United States, misperception of that time is not the issue. The point is that it mattered. And when President Kennedy saw the respect accorded to the Soviet Union following Yuri Gagarin's flight, he understood as well the strategic value of human spaceflight. And that's what I want to discuss with you today, the strategic importance of the civil space program to our nation. I'll also provide a look ahead for NASA as we embark on returning to the moon and going on to Mars. It is commonly agreed that the space activities of our military forces and the intelligence community are strategic. We talk about strategic missiles and strategic reconnaissance. The Russians talk about their strategic rocket forces. But what about the strategic importance of civil space? Isn't that simply about scientific discovery, or human exploration, or practical applications such as weather monitoring, or navigation, or communications? Only 3 nations have successful human spaceflight programs: the United States, Russia, and most recently China. India has announced its intention to develop such capabilities. The national economies of these countries exceed in scale the economy of the United States as it existed in the early 1960s. So if they wish to send their own astronauts into space, it is simply a matter of national will of choosing to do so. Europe and Japan clearly have the economic and technical wherewithal to do so as well. For either of them, it is simply a matter of choosing to do so. 50 years ago, first Sputnik and then Yuri Gagarin sent a message about the capabilities of the Soviet Union. President Kennedy recognized that this message must be answered. He recognized that the United States was behind the Soviet Union in human spaceflight. And he recognized its significance concerning the world's perception of leadership when he said, "Those who came before us made certain that this country rode the first waves of the industrial revolution, the first waves of modern invention, and the first wave of nuclear power. And this generation does not intend to founder in the backwash of the coming age of space. We mean to be a part of it, and we mean to lead it." For the eyes of the world now look into space, to the moon, and to the planets beyond, and we have vowed that we shall not see it governed by a hostile flag of conquest, but by a banner of freedom and peace. We have vowed that we shall not see space filled with weapons of mass destruction, but with instruments of knowledge and understanding. Yet the vows of this nation can only be fulfilled if we in this nation are first, and therefore we intend to be first. In short, our leadership in science and in industry, our hopes for peace and security, our obligations to ourselves as well as others, all require us to make this effort, to solve these mysteries, to solve them for the good of all men, and to become the world's leading spacefaring nation. With President Kennedy's focused goal of moon, man, decade in mind, our nation dared to do great things. Many in government and in industry across this nation turned the President's goal into reality and lifted our nation's spirits in that unprecedented achievement. But they did much more than that. The Apollo program helped create the systems engineering discipline that spread throughout our nation's industrial base and found applications in other diverse fields of the Civil and Department of Defense space business, aviation, automotive industry, healthcare, and much more. Apollo moved the state-of-the-art throughout all of engineering. What is more strategic than that? The need for precise manufacturing methods and engineering standards for human spaceflight systems created a requirement for industry to develop new manufacturing methods and operate to a higher, more precise standard of excellence. The operation of complex, integrated space systems required revolutionary thinking in their development and their management. This revolution in our nation's space systems engineering discipline was the real spin-off from Apollo, and our nation has benefited immensely from it in many direct and indirect ways. People seldom recall President Kennedy's breadth of vision as he also challenged the nation to accelerate the development of communications and weather satellites for worldwide application. Because of that investment, we have created a world that is much more connected and safer than otherwise. We have set standards that are followed around the world for the provision of weather data and the distribution of services. We have significantly expanded the goals of the 1960s. We have 2 rovers, Spirit and Opportunity, which have provided a continuous human telepresence on Mars for the last 3 years, well beyond what we had originally planned. We conceived, planned, built, and deployed the Hubble Space Telescope, which continues to provide unprecedented views of the distant reaches of the universe. We have carried out the first reconnaissance of the solar system, conducted the broadest and most intensive surveys of Earth's weather and climate, and developed the first global navigation and communication systems. When we consider the strategic impact of the civil space program, we must ask, what is the value to the United States of being engaged in projects where we are doing the kinds of things that other nations aspire to? And what is the value of including them as partners? The critical and often overlooked strategic importance of international cooperation in space, I would suggest, is national security. The most important aspect of the International Space Station is the tried and tested partnership that has been forged among the spacefaring nations of Canada, Europe, Japan, Russia, and the United States. This partnership has endured tremendous hardships, especially with the loss of the Space Shuttle Columbia, and stands by itself as a significant international accomplishment. The Space Station Partnership has collectively undertaken the largest task ever performed by the civilian agencies of the United States or our international partners. This endeavor rivals the Apollo program in cost and complexity. When completed, the space station will be 4 times larger than the Russian Mir space station and 5 times larger than Skylab. Now we find ourselves at a similar point in this nation's space program to where we were in the early 1960s, planning to return to the moon. There is no doubt that humans will return to the moon. The only question is, which humans? Which country will send them? What values will they bring? We are the last generation in a position to determine these answers. We are the generation to help determine if the national will to lead still exists. More than 3 years ago, President Bush gave NASA a defining challenge and a new direction through the Vision for Space Exploration. The vision commits our nation to a new journey of exploration of the solar system, beginning with the return of humans to the moon by the end of next decade, and leading to subsequent landing of pioneering astronauts on Mars. Speaking at NASA headquarters in Washington, D.C. on January 14, 2004, President Bush announced the new vision for space exploration, concluding with these words: "Mankind is drawn to the heavens for the same reason we were once drawn into unknown lands and across the open ocean. We choose to explore space because doing so improves our lives and lifts our national spirit. So let us continue the journey." Let me remind you of what the vision calls for NASA to do. Fly the space shuttle as safely as possible until its retirement, not later than 2010. Bring a new crew exploration vehicle into service as soon as possible after the shuttle retirement, no later than 2014. Develop a balanced overall program of science, exploration, and aeronautics at NASA, consistent with the redirection of the human spaceflight program to focus on exploration. Complete the International Space Station in a manner consistent with our international partner commitments and the needs of human exploration. Encourage the pursuit of appropriate partnerships with the emerging commercial space sector. Establish a lunar return program having the maximum possible utility for later missions to Mars and other destinations. we will extend human missions to the moon by 2020 to establish a lunar base. So how are we doing? We continue to fly the shuttle safely. We will fly another mission to the International Space Station 2 weeks from today. We have a solid plan for completing the International Space Station. We've completed a major milestone with the installation of new truss sections and solar arrays to provide more power, specifically power for 2 laboratories from the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency and the European Space Agency that will be delivered to the space station in upcoming years. This will triple the station's laboratories. And development of the Orion crew exploration vehicle is well underway, with Lockheed Martin as the prime contractor. NASA cannot possibly carry out the vision for space exploration alone. We will all have a role to play in this great enterprise. Other nations and other federal agencies have roles to play. And industry, academia, and researchers play an obvious and significant role and are major partners for NASA. At this stage in the development of our plans for a return to the moon and the development of a lunar outpost, it is important that we at NASA not try to prescribe roles and responsibilities for future international partners. Instead, we have defined a minimalist exploration architecture centered around the Orion and Ares crew and heavy lift launch vehicles as the first critical elements, with the hope that international and commercial partners will want to augment these capabilities with their own. We're already collaborating with other nations on a series of satellite missions to map the resources of the moon, which one day will be mined to help establish a permanent lunar outpost. More than half of NASA's armada of more than 50 robotic science missions involves some form of international participation, and almost 2/3 of our science missions on the drawing board today have an international component. The vision poses enormous challenges for engineering and crew health. It also presents great opportunity for us to increase human knowledge and capability. Indeed, the potential risks to human health on long-duration missions beyond Earth orbit represent the greatest challenge to human exploration of deep space. I mentioned the strategic importance of our partnerships with other nations on the International Space Station program. In addition, much of what medical experts are learning about the adaptation of the human body to extended exposure to the microgravity environment of space is coming from research being conducted aboard the International Space Station. The ISS represents the only opportunity to perform on-orbit long-duration microgravity studies of the human health and performance and technologies relevant for future long-duration missions planned during the next 25 years. Resolving human health issues involved in building an outpost on the moon and journeying onto Mars and beyond is essential to carrying out the vision for space exploration. NASA's Human Research Program, based at the Johnson Space Center, is a research and technology program dedicated to understanding and reducing the risks to human space explorers. The questions we aim to answer on the International Space Station include: how does the rate and nature of bone loss relate to fracture risk? Are in-flight changes in cardiac function dangerous or a normal adaptation to a new homeostasis? Do immune functions change, pose increased risk of infection? Do drugs lose enough potency to become ineffective? Will sensory motor performance degrade to the point that operations soon after Mars landing will be at risk? Space station research will be used to develop and refine countermeasures to mitigate these risks and to test new medical support technologies needed for lunar and planetary exploration. What potential countermeasures are being considered? Most likely, future deep space travel will require a combination of new gadgetry and new medications. The key to avoiding problems will come from training that helps astronauts recognize the earliest signs of difficulty, as well as equipping flight crews with the tools to overcome them. Assessment tools are being readied to help crews determine their fatigue level, and measures are being made of potential biomarkers for stress and nutritional status. Studies have also fueled optimism that medications will continue like to throw it against the wall. Probably can't do that. Studies have also fueled optimism that medications will contribute to a solution for bone loss. One is a class of drugs called bisphosphonates, prescribed to stem bone loss in women with osteoporosis. Another is potassium citrate, which is prescribed to prevent kidney stones. Another significant issue that we must resolve relates to space radiation and the environment of lunar and planetary missions. The space shuttle era has kept astronauts orbiting within the Earth's magnetic field. That field helps to shield the crew members against the intense levels of radiation from solar storms. It's widely recognized that space radiation is one of the real challenges to carrying out long-duration space missions. Researchers will likely look to a multifaceted strategy to overcome the radiation hazard. The solution likely will rely on satellites that can monitor the sun for signs of developing solar storms, and new spacecraft will incorporate lightweight shielding materials to create havens for astronauts during radiation storms. While much of the research is performed using Earth-based particle accelerators, we expect to use the space station to test the next generation of dosimeters needed by exploration crews. We've also experimented with telemedicine, which may provide a means for Earth-bound doctors to come to the aid of a distant astronaut in an emergency. Using ultrasound imaging devices, astronauts aboard the space station have transmitted images of internal organs and bones to doctors on the ground. Last year, astronauts in an undersea lab conducted experiments in which a surgeon 1,200 miles away in Canada used a television link with a robot to suture a badly damaged vein in a patient simulator. The simulated patient survived. Much research into these and other human health issues related to long-duration spaceflight needs to be resolved for us to achieve the vision for space exploration. We will also learn much that we can apply to improving the human condition on our home planet. It's important to realize that when we leave Earth orbit for the first time, and I consider the moon in Earth orbit, we will have to be self-sustaining for the first time in human history. We have to develop recycling capabilities if we're going to be gone from Earth for 2 to 3 years at a time. These same techniques and capabilities that we have to develop to be self-sustaining can apply to spaceship Earth just as well. My grandchildren and their grandchildren are going to have to live on this spaceship Earth. We have to learn to be truly self-sustaining on this planet we have. Those of us in today's workforce are paving the way toward meeting the vision for space exploration. But enormous challenges lie ahead. There's much work to be done to fulfill the vision. When those first spacefarers land on Mars, many of us in today's workforce will have long retired. It is today's high school and college students who will be the leaders and the explorers of tomorrow, taking us to Mars and destinations beyond. That's why the goal of inspiring the next generation to pursue careers in science, engineering, and math is so important. The actor Tom Hanks, who starred in the movie Apollo 13 and told the story of Apollo in the TV miniseries From the Earth to the Moon, speaks eloquently of what NASA's missions to the moon meant for him and for America during the tumultuous 1960s and early 1970s, with the Vietnam War, the Civil Rights Movement, and the assassinations of John and Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King. In a simple yet insightful way, Tom Hanks said of the Apollo program, "If we can do this, we can do anything." What we do in space contributes to all critical measures of our nation's influence, whether it's economic or military or political or cultural. What the United States chooses to do in space or chooses not to do in space matters immensely. I would like to close with a few final words from President Kennedy. Speaking in San Antonio on November 21st, 1963, the day before he was assassinated, he said, "For more than 3 years I have spoken about the new frontier. This is not a partisan term, and it is not the exclusive property of Republicans or Democrats. It refers instead to this nation's place in history, to the fact that we do stand on the edge of a great new era, filled with both crisis and opportunity, an era to be characterized by achievement and by challenge. It is an era which calls for action and for the best efforts of all those who attest the unknown and the uncertain in every phase of human endeavor. It is a time for pathfinders and pioneers." These words are as appropriate for our time today as we embark on expanding the final frontier as they were then. If we can do this, we can do anything. Thank you, and I'd like to answer questions if you
As we start the questions, if you have a question, would you come up to one of these two microphones, please? And also, I'd like to ask people, please silence your cell phones. And if you're a speaker, please set it on the table because if it's close to the microphone, it will pick up the signals. If anyone has a question, please come to our mic.
I can't see.
Can I start? Yes. Okay. Yeah, back over here. I'm the guy back in this one here. You're right. But with all the information that the Russians received and worked on the Salyut and Mir stations, some of them up to a year in orbit, are we validating what they found? Are we finding things different than they found in this long period of space? Did they, the things that they did, we can't do ourselves, vice versa? How are we building on what they did?
Yeah, I tell you, one of the things I've been surprised about is the exchange of information we had even during the height of the Cold War. The Russians, of course, had long-term spaceflight early on. I believe their record now is 438 days, something like that. And we had excellent relationship and communications at the working level, probably because of Apollo-Soyuz. But they were sharing their medical data with us. And what we're finding at the space station, of course, it's because our technology is 30 years more mature, but we're finding essentially the same data, but it's much finer, less granular than it was back then. We're continuing to, of course, share information, but it's a continuation of what we've been doing for 30 years. So together with the Russians and the Europeans, the Japanese, and the Canadians, we are, in fact, developing a tremendous body of information about what the effect of long-term spaceflight has on the human body. We're a little more conservative. One area is radiation, of course. We've got pretty conservative limits on how much exposure our astronauts have. In fact, we're bringing Sunny Williams back on the shuttle mission here next month. Originally, she was going to come back on the next flight, but of course that was delayed. So we're going to bring her back and launch Clay Anderson this time because we want to limit her radiation exposure so that if we wanted to, we could turn her around and fly her again on another space station, long-duration mission. So we're a little more conservative in some areas than the Russians have. It's astounding to me that Sergei Krikalev, most experienced Russian cosmonaut, has been in space 803 days, and will probably go again for a long-duration mission. just blows me away that he will probably end up spending 3 years of his life in orbit. But I'm delighted with the cooperation that we've been getting with all the international partners, especially in the medical area. It truly is an international effort.
Hello, Mike. Good here. How are you doing, sir?
Brad?
I had to write my question down, and I'm asking this question. I always ask this question, but I wanted to preface it with applauding you on everything you said today. And if you could say this out in public, it would be wonderful, but we know the lawyers won't let you say most of it. Mike speaks all over the country to the choir, and it would be nice if the American people could hear what he says, because he gets frustrated because NASA does so much good. They do wonderful things on the space station that help the American people, but they don't know it, and they can't know it because we're stifled. So the NASA community has a basic issue communicating the good NASA does. And, they can't see the strategic vision that we offer. So my question is, does NASA plan to enter into space agreements with the market, the space entrepreneurial market in the future that isn't constrained by what we're constrained from doing, so that we can get that word out there? Or what's the plan for that, if there is one?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, do we plan on entering into agreements with those companies that are able to advertise what NASA does, since NASA can't really freely do that?
Well, what we're trying to do, in fact, and we are working, we've got a strategic communications group that's been formed at NASA headquarters. When I came in, one of my desires was, in fact, to look for ways to make the public more aware of what the space program does for them. All the studies that have been conducted indicate that the public has a very high opinion of NASA, higher than any other government agency. They think we do that cutting-edge technology stuff, which we can do more of it. But they don't know exactly what we do. The general public is aware we've got those 2 rovers on Mars. They've heard of the Hubble Space Telescope. But they're really unaware of what we're doing with the space station and the exploration vision. We need to get that word out, and we need to phrase it in a way that they can relate to a person. Why should they care? And that's why I'm emphasizing this whole concept that we've got to learn to be self-sustaining. And in fact, planet Earth has to learn to be self-sustaining. There's a direct connection there. So we are looking for ways to get the message out here. Mike Griffin is, he spent his first 2 years as administrator getting the exploration program off to a solid start. I think he's done a marvelous job. Now he's got time to listen and say, okay, how do we keep the program sold? And we're looking for ways to do that. Okay?
Hello. Hi. My name is James Shapiro, and I'm a mechanical engineering student at UC San Diego. And I'm invited to speak with young kids, junior high, even elementary school students, as well as high school students about space, and speak on behalf of various organizations I'm part of. And I've had some troubles with actually connecting with these kids. And you spoke a while ago about the way the National Space Society is focused on inspiring young minds. How do you accomplish this? What are the best ways that the National Space Society has found to connect these young minds with these awesome things that we're doing in space?
Well, I can't speak for the National Space Society. I'll let George do that. I can tell you that at NASA we're very interested in connecting with the middle school students. If we're going to get more children interested in the technical fields, math, science, and engineering, and so forth, we've got to grab them when they're in middle school. It's too late when they get to high school. So we're looking at ways. Of course, we've got our Educator Astronaut Program. In 2004, we hired 4 middle school science teachers as astronauts. They've done fantastically. Probably should have been hiring them long before we started hiring dumb pilots like me, because they've done a really good job. But we're also using them to connect not only with the students, but the middle school science teachers around the country. We're looking for the multiplier effect. We're also looking for ways to use modern technology, the websites and so forth, to get as much information out as we possibly can. And that's part of our strategic communications initiative. How can we connect with these young people in school? If you've got some ideas, we'd love to hear them.
Thanks very much for what you told us today. Even the choir can use reminders sometimes of why we're here, keep going. You talked in some detail about what we're doing between now and 2020. I recall reading somewhere that Mike Griffin gave a speech talking about NASA's vision for the next 50 years. Is there some document or blueprint covering the period 2020 to 2050 that NASA's produced that's available to find?
No, not really. And we're being very careful, trying not to describe in detail what we think we're going to be doing. We've got very clear marching orders, not only from this administration, but from Congress with the Authorization Act. And it's important to remember that Authorization Act they passed 2 years ago, first one we had in many years, in fact, made the exploration program the law of the land. It's not going to change unless Congress changes the law. Again, there's no indication they want to do that. So we're trying to make sure we focus on learning how to explore the solar system and be self-sustaining using the space station, using the moon. Now, we're obviously looking at what it will take to go to Mars long term, but we don't have the resources to do everything at one time. So we're trying to take this a step at a time, if we can. And I don't want to stop at Mars. I am so excited that we have found evidence of water virtually throughout the solar system. Lots of moons, lots of planets. Where there's water, there's a possibility of life, which would just be absolutely profound. So we're trying to keep our aperture open here, if you will. I think we've got time for one more question, I think.
Mike, in 1990 in Huntsville, Alabama, there was a space summit, and we heard folks like Jim Odom, who has a job similar to yours today at that time, and Mike Griffin, talk similar things to what you're saying today. And in 1993, that all went away. And the question to you is, because we're hearing, I was just at NASA headquarters, $2 and $3 billion for a sortie mission to the moon. What can NASA do, and you and your job, to help make things in such a way that in 2010 we don't see the same type of retreat that we saw in 1992, 1993?
Well, that's a very good question. I get a lot of questions from people who say, okay, when a new administration comes in, what happens? We're going to change direction again. The good news is, if you're only interested in the space program, I couldn't tell you who to vote for. We do seem to have good bipartisan support. I've been delighted with that, both the Democrats and the Republicans. You know, when the President gave the State of the Union and talked about the American Competitiveness Initiative, the Democrat response was, that's nice, but it doesn't go far enough. So they're saying the right words. It comes down to, can we find the money that we need to get the job done? At NASA, we essentially have to go as we can pay. Whatever the budget is, we'll get it done as quickly as possible. We can't lobby for more money, which we could. I used to do that really well. So whatever budget we get, and it's a reasonable budget. We've got a good plan. The President's request is a reasonable budget. If we get it authorized by Congress, we can be flying, minimize the gap between the shuttle and the Orion, and get on with it. I can't foresee the future. I wish I could. I'm trying to get the word out, and not just preaching to the choir, but to the general public, that the space program is important for not only our national security, but for our economy. And the two of those are tied together out here. So I'm out of time. I want to thank you for your time today. I really appreciate your support and involvement with our space program. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike. And I think many of you may know that Mike was just inducted into the Astronaut Hall of Fame in early May. So thank you so much for being here and for honoring us with your presence.